Fantastic. Thanks to those of you who have stayed in this room for our fantastic panel of speakers sharing practice around embedding sustainability in education. We're really pleased to be having more opportunity to practice share, as I feel it's a key aspect of this event. Thank you so much. There's so much fantastic work going on across the school, and it's really good to hear from our colleagues. First I'm welcoming colleagues from health policy, and really pleased to have Miqdad, Prakriti, Zuha and Hrushikesh, who are sharing their work, using game design to help students to tackle large questions. So we'll be taking questions after each talk, because the topics are very varied, so do save things up, and we'll bring you in.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk through an experience we had this year where we've designed this new course using game design, and I'll just tell you what we did, why we did it, and then I've got some very generous student volunteers who are going to tell you how they found it. So they haven't told me yet what they're going to say, and so feel free to ask them questions, to ask them if it worked, if it didn't work, or what worked or it didn't work, etc. Fine. So the course was called Health Equity, Climate Change and the Common Good. And so in the Department of Health Policy, we teach a lot of things, but we don't teach anything either on inequalities or on climate change, which seems to be a bit of an omission, given that those are probably the two things that are driving health more than anything else in the world. So we thought we need to address this, and so let's build a course around addressing this. And so we designed this course, and when we were designing the course, we thought, okay, let's try something a little bit different. So most of our courses are lecture, seminar kind of format. We decided for this that we're not going to do lectures at all. We're just going to run 3-hour workshops. So every week we had a 3-hour workshop, and during that workshop, the students in advance were given readings to do, and during that workshop, we discussed the readings, and we made board games, and we hacked board games, and then we discussed how that board game playing and hacking experience related back to the readings. And so we did this kind of thing every week for the first half of the course. And in the second half of the course, we still had readings, but the students then had to design in their groups their own board game. And their own board game had to then demonstrate how they've understood the various theories and ideas that we've been talking about in the course. And so here you can see some of them in action. So some of the games were like board games that other people had made and they were hacking. Some of the board games were the games that they had made themselves. Some of it was more role play. We did some legislative theater. So we did a whole bunch of different things. At least from a teaching perspective, it was really fun. It was fun to engage with the ideas through these methods, and just to see how people were able to translate the things that we've been talking about into how would you change this game to reflect that thing that we did. What does it mean to you now? And it also meant that if the students didn't do the readings, they were really lost, because there was no lecture to tell them what was in the readings. And they had to do stuff, right? And there was no recording of the sessions. It was just a come in and you do things, and then you leave after reflecting on them collectively, okay? And so why did we use games, right? And so some of the reasons that I was thinking about for using games was, in this course, we're thinking about these big questions, and these big questions about climate change and inequalities and what do we want the world to look like are quite intimidating, and they need quite a lot of imagination to engage with, and they need some kind of permission to say that, look, this is what the world looks like now. We don't like it. We're going to remake the world, right? And so this kind of board game tool was useful for them to be able to, first of all, collectively agree on what they think the world looks like now. So they kind of collectively imagined, what does the world look like? Where have we come from? And then it allowed them to imagine futures and say, what do we want the world to look like, and how will we make that world come into being? And they had to kind of, and it wasn't just an individual project, it was a group project. So they had to kind of discuss and kind of come up with ideas about what does good look like? What does success look like? What does progress look like? What do we care about? What's going to stop us getting there? How are we going to get there, right? And so they had to, and it wasn't about, playing by other people's rules and feeling disempowered. Often you talk about climate change, you talk about inequalities, and you think, this world is terrible, right? But it was saying, okay, fix it. Play by your own rules. What are your rules? How are you going to fix this, right? And we used board games rather than computer games or complex modeling or anything else, because if we used complex modeling or computer games, we would spend the whole course learning how to program computers or do differential equations or whatever else, and we'd never get around to dealing with, what are we here for? We're not here to be computer programmers or mathematicians. We're here to tackle these questions. And so board games were a really nice mechanism where you can think about non-linearities and feedback loops and all sorts of these things without necessarily having to go through pages of equations and loads of code and stuff, right? And so we did that, and it just took away that layer of noise and allowed the students to really focus on the questions that we're talking about. And finally, and maybe most importantly, making and playing games is fun, right? And people enjoy doing it. And so I told the students that if you want to use AI, use AI. If you want to use whatever you want, right? But at the end of the day, you don't use AI to do the fun bits of your life. You use AI to do the boring bits of your life. You don't send AI to the cinema and then tell it, what was the film about? You want to go and see the film. Similarly, if you're playing and making games, you want to play and make the games, right? So that was, so I think they did use AI, probably. I'd encourage them to use it as much as they could, but I think they also engaged with the task because it was enjoyable, right? I'm not going to go through all of these, but we created a set of learning outcomes. And so normally for courses in our department, we have a standard marking framework that we apply to all the courses. I think this is the only course where we don't, so we had to create our own marking framework that was more kind of coherent with what we wanted to get out of the course and assessing the board game, etc. And so I can share these slides, or we can put them on, it'll be on the video anyway, but I'm happy to share them if anybody wants to reach out. And so we had a formative assessment halfway through the course where we gave the students a climate change board game, and actually this year we'd got some funding from the Eden Center to hire a professional board game designer who made this climate change board game called Daybreak. And so he came in and he co-taught the course, and the students were given this game and they were told to mark the game using the course marking criteria and then critique that game. And my friend Matteo, who was there, was quite concerned about some of the feedback he got, and he's making a new version of his game now. But it was just a way of getting the students familiar with what are we going to expect from them in the second half. And in the second half, when they made their own game, they had in their mind already, how did we mark that game? How are we going to make our game deliver to those criteria, right? And then the major part of the summative assessment was they made a game, and then they made a 10-minute video of that game explaining how it met the marking criteria. So the things that we marked were the 10-minute video rather than the game itself, right? And then each of them had to write an individual essay critiquing their game and reflecting on the process and how it met the criteria, and how the things that they wanted to do didn't come through because of the group was terrible or whatever else, right? And so that was the other 30%. And the whole process was really well supported by the Eden Center. So when I did my PG Cert, that was one of the case studies I used through the teaching. Then I got a decolonizing fellowship where I was developing some of the reading lists and materials. I got this Catalyst Fund to help fund Matteo to design and co-teach. And I've always had lots of help and advice from Yang, from Owen, from Darren, and all sorts of people around video, around assessment, around. So it's been really helpful to get that kind of engagement as well from the Eden Center and that support and encouragement and opportunities to present back. And we did a workshop earlier in November as well. And so, and some of the challenges, it was really hard to fit everything in 3 hours. Actually, 3 hours is not very long for a workshop where people need to take breaks and need to do other things, and you've got equipment and stuff, and so that was kind of interesting. We coded this as a workshop on the timetable, and that breaks everything, where you can't have like you can't have a workshop with a restricted number of participants. It has to be a seminar if it has a restricted number of participants. And so they had to take the course off the selection system for the first 2 weeks of course selection, and it was a nightmare to make sure that students would still do it. But some of them persisted, luckily. And now we're kind of thinking about how to scale it up. So next year, we're thinking about going from, this time we had about 14 or 15 students. Next year, we want to double it to 30. So we're just thinking about how to scale it. And we're thinking maybe we'll have the discussions bits as small group seminars, and then, so 1 hour seminars, and then 2 hour collective workshops where they do the designy bits. And so we're going to trial that next year, but any thoughts on that would be helpful. And then I'm going to hand over to these guys to tell you what they thought.
Sorry.
Okay. I feel like a nervous, like sitting next to the professor who taught the entire course and a lot of people who helped to design, and now I have to show as a sample piece how we executed together. So like asking a question first, like have you ever been in a university where you actually had to make a game as a part of credit? Raise your hand. Just 3 of us in the room. Not right. So most of the courses here in LSE or wherever in the university, it's kind of predictable. You got to go write a policy brief, write 3,000, 4,000 summative essay, or sit in the exam. Even the exam questions are kind of predictable already. So in the world where we are used to with the certain patterns, this course in the middle of nowhere is like, okay, you're challenged. We're thrown into like everything together. The time when I signed up for the course, I was naturally drawn towards, as Miqdad shared, inclusion of climate and equity in the course, which seems very much needed, and I was naturally drawn towards that. But when I read about the course details, and when I was actually with my classmates in the workshop, it was nightmare. Like we have to study, like it's not just another course, you just study and pretend like you studied, but no one gonna check in. But this course, if you are not studying, that you can be spotted there. You have to study, not just study, articulate it, and then make a game. And not like an ice-breaking game where you're gonna get scores. So a couple of weeks we really struggled, and then something that seated within me is like how this course and the course designer trusted us with zero background of game making, zero background of even exposure to the board game. They trusted us to read the theories, articulate it, and make our own game. Thank you for trusting us on that. I think we did fairly good enough job at the end. Connecting it with Matteo's game Daybreak, I think at that time we realized that all the readings we did actually connects, it fills the tension in the room. The way Daybreak is like we have to play either China or other parts of the world, and then different layers of policies. Rizvi gonna talk more about that. And that connected us with a game we made with our team. Our game was like, let's see China in 2050, utopic China or dystopia China, depends on how the stakeholder gonna play. So that gave us like a holistic approach of learning and understanding. And I would say, as Miqdad highlighted, in the world of rapid growing of AI and technology, we definitely used AI to summarize, to make a podcast, listen the reading and everything. We did all the boring stuff with AI. But to convince other colleagues to listen to my idea and collaborate, AI wouldn't teach that, how to do that. We had to be empathetic, collaborative, and everything. I think we learned all those essential skills that was beyond AI or automated. Something that is still we are retaining that. And then, honestly, this course didn't just thought about common good. It actually helped us to build one together. And honestly, I would say there should be many courses as brave enough as HP 437. Thank you.
You don't have to say good stuff.
Sure. Okay. I guess I'll speak a little bit about the reading specifically. So I did not have any sort of background in political sciences or a lot of history. So there was a lot in the program generally that I felt like I was still catching up on. And the readings on this course were quite holistic in terms of tackling inequities and just the general, as Miqdad mentioned, the general overall climate of political climate, not just like climate of the world right now. So I felt like I was getting up to speed quite fast. However, I do think our course, initially I did think that our course instructor was a little bit too optimistic with the reading material that we were being handed. Because initially I felt like I was not able to catch up with it. And the second thing was I was quite skeptical about how that would sort of translate into the games that we were playing, and how that would translate into the discussions as well. And I felt like that was one thing that initially when we would have discussions, because there was no lecture style, we would have a generalized discussion, whereas what did we think about the readings? And I felt like even if people had sort of read up on the stuff, it would not allow conversation to flow. But I think the good thing was that there was feedback, because initially in the first couple of sessions, we did not have any directed questions. But I think by the third session, we were given little sheets that would allow us to engage better while discussing. Otherwise, initially, there was just sort of silence. But by the third session, we had that thing where, okay. So I think just the learning, the instructors learning throughout as the course went on was quite interesting as well. And yeah, initially also, when we would play those little games in the middle, there was this, okay, how much of the readings that we're done are we consolidating through the games? And we would tend to move more into the fun side. And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, what am I really using from the learnings from the readings in here? But then they would come in to sort of go like, okay, think about it like this, to specifically sort of connect it to that. So definitely there was that element of combining those two. And so while I had been skeptical in the beginning, it did sort of like work out in the end, especially towards the end when we were designing our own things. The way we had to string back everything to sort of make it work was very stimulating. Yeah, that would be me. Thank you.
Thank you, Zuha. For me, I come from an activist background. I used to work I used to volunteer as a climate activist. And it's all gloomy, it's all negative when you are in that space. But this module, in a way, provided that space for me to basically find people who think in a similar way. And it also made me realize how when we are like in the activist space, we don't tend to like think about how to implement certain things. And Daybreak was a great example of how it made me realize specifically how complex the policies are, and the game had a lot of nuance. And when we were like decoding the games, when we were hacking the games, I realized how games also perpetuate or normalize inequalities. So we had this one session where we were playing Monopoly, and like when we were playing Monopoly at that time, we realized how uncomfortable it made us when we were playing it, because we were playing against each other. And Daybreak works completely the opposite way. You have to collaborate. It gives a very important message that you cannot solve this crisis on your own. There's no way you can solve this crisis on your own. You have to collaborate. So in a way, that was really important. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. Oops, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
That was good sense. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining Dr. Asaria to share his work and all your work. We've got time for maybe 2 super quick questions. Supriya.
Thank you so much. This is so far away from what I usually do, but very inspiring to see this. So my question is more to the students. You have experienced the regular forms of teaching. And so do you think you will retain the material in this course much longer? Do you think you learned it more in depth compared to other forms of teaching, for example?
Oh yeah, this is working. Hello. Hello. I'll answer this question because I recently went back home and I took a few copies of the books that we were asked to readings for in the course, and my friends also loved it. And I also shared a few of the readings, and also I am planning to take the Daybreak, the game that we played, like a copy of it back home, so that more people can play. And I've also this was probably the only course for which I did all the readings on my own. I didn't miss out on any of the readings, and I finished the books. like we had one chapter from the book for our readings, but I finished 2 of the books completely. And the course was the only reason I did it. I didn't do it for any other course. Like I didn't read the whole book. So yeah.
I think quickly adding to the retention part, the way we've been taught about the system reinforcing and balancing, I think we can just normally take the bits of the course content into our regular life. Well, I was just outside the UK doing other part of the teaching, but I was adding some of the components we learned from the course, and definitely this is the one thing we repeatedly said. This is the course that we're able to. We're doing pretty good on all of the course. We are good students, but in terms of actual learning outside, I think the maximum amount of retention is through the learning workshop model of this course.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. Any more questions? Yes, one from Yang.
I have a question for all of you, but I wonder, I can see you design uncertainty or openness into your course, like you think about designing. How do you find, like as an educator or as a student, what's your strategy to cope the continuous like uncertainty or openness to ideas? What is, like after retrospectively thinking, what do you feel like your strategy or your feeling about this?
Miqdad, have a mic back.
So I think from the kind of teacher's perspective, I didn't have an answer I wanted them to reach. I just wanted them to engage with the questions, and I trusted that by the end they would have come up with their own answers. I think for them, maybe it was a little bit overwhelming in the beginning to say that you need to figure out how to solve this. But I think that was kind of part of the process of the course, that you're kind of supposed to drown in it for a while, and then at the end, it comes together. And I don't know if anybody has reflection on whether that was your experience or...
No, yeah. That was definitely the experience. So when he says drown for a while, that while was quite a long while. We did have certain guidance in the sense that, okay, so the uncertainty goes, because we're looking at a game in this sense, it's a dystopian or utopian, and then that uncertainty sort of translates onto the players who would be playing the game that we're designing. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of back and forth in how that goes, how the metrics go, what moves direct, what's happening in the world next, and what's happening to our players next as well. So that was definitely a very difficult part of the design. And I don't really know if we've cracked it yet, but we did try our best to work at least on the uncertainty part of the dystopian utopia and to see where we can sort of make that sort of function. So it was a difficult thing to tackle, and I'm not really sure if we got it, but we've tried, yeah.
We're nearby.
Yeah.
I guess from the teaching perspective, what we wanted to do is just make sure they engage with the readings, and it doesn't matter what they come up with at the end. Actually, it just matters that they engage with the readings and they thought about how do they link together all of these ideas, and they try to do that. They don't have to create a best-selling board game. They just have to engage with those readings. And so there wasn't that much uncertainty in saying that, look, every week I'm going to make them engage in these readings, whether they make a board game or not in the end, as long as they buy into the process. And I guess that's where the uncertainty was, that are they just going to say, this is stupid, I'm not doing it? And luckily they persisted. So.
I'm so sorry not to have more time to dig into this absolutely fascinating activity and assessment, but I just, if we could all thank Miqdad and his students.